Hello and welcome to Math Matters. I'm Ms. Granados and today we're going to be learning to compute fractions. In today's lesson, we'll be solving a practical problem involving fractions and mixed numbers and then sharing our thinking about how we solved it. We'll look at the connections and differences between two different strategies. As you review this content, you'll be using the portrait of a graduate skills of communicator and critical and creative thinker. You are communicating your thinking when you write down your strategies or when you share your strategies orally with someone near you. Anytime you think about a problem and come up with solutions, you're being a creative and critical thinker. You'll be doing that a lot today. You'll need some paper and something to write with, so go ahead and gather your supplies quickly. We're going to continue our number sense routine, SPLAT. What number is represented in this model? Well, each of the circles that aren't blue are divided into 4 equal parts, so each red part is 1/4 of the circle. That means we can count by fourths. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. That's the same as 1 whole. There's still some more fourths to count. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. That's another one, so we have 2 so far. The only circles left are fully shaded in blue, so we can count those with the next whole numbers. 3, 4. There's a total of 4 represented here. Okay. SPLAT. What is the total under the SPLAT? Well, what do we know? How many can we still see? Let's count the whole numbers first and then the fraction. 1, 1 1/4, 1 2/4, 1 3/4. We can see 1 3/4 and we know there are 4 total. So how many are under the SPLAT? Take about a minute to figure out how many are under the SPLAT. Use your communicator skills to explain or justify your answer, either by explaining it to someone near you or by writing it down. If you know how many are under there, can you think of it a different way? You may have thought of what we started with, 2 whole circles and 8/4. Then you might have thought about taking away the circles that we can still see, which were 1 3/4. We can then count how much is left. 1, 1 1/4, 1 2/4, 1 3/4, 1 4/4, which is the same as 2, and 2 1/4. So 2 1/4 is what might be under the SPLAT. How could we write a number sentence for this strategy? Well, we started with 4 and took away the parts we could see, 1 3/4, so the equation could be 4 minus 1 3/4 equals 2 1/4. What's another strategy? Maybe you started with what we could see, 1 3/4, and then counted up until you got to the total of 4 whole circles. Once we got to 4, we'd need to figure out how many we added. So to figure out how many more we added, we can start counting. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, which is the same as 1, and 1 1/4. Plus another 1 takes us to 2 1/4. So we added 2 1/4 more to get to 4. What equation represents this strategy? 1 3/4 plus 2 1/4 equals 4. Let's see if we're correct. Let's look under the splat to see the total. 1, and then 4/4 makes 2, and then 1 more fourth makes 2 1/4. Yay, we were correct. All right, let's dive into our story problem. Tony bought some pounds of grapes. He ate some pounds, and his sister ate some pounds of grapes. What are you picturing in your mind as we read this story? Well, Tony bought 4 3/8 pounds of grapes. He ate some pounds and his sister ate some pounds of grapes. What changed in the problem? What do we learn from this new information? Yeah, we now know that Tony bought a total of 4 3/8 pounds of grapes. Can you imagine how many grapes that must be? That's over 4 pounds of grapes. Tony bought 4 3/8 pounds of grapes. He ate 3/4 of a pound, and his sister ate 1 1/8 pounds of grapes. Now what new information did we just learn? Yeah, we now know how many pounds of grapes Tony and his sister ate. Tony ate 3/4 of a pound. But wait, is that more or less than 1 pound? Yeah, that's not a whole pound yet. His sister ate 1 1/8 of a pound. Now, is that more than what Tony ate or less than what he ate? Yeah, it's more because she ate more than 1 pound of grapes, and Tony ate less than 1 pound of grapes. Did Tony and his sister eat all the grapes? How do you know? Yeah, probably not, right? Because 3/4 of a pound is less than 1 pound. 1 1/8 pound is a little bit more than 1 pound. 1 and 1 make 2 pounds. And he bought 4 3/8 pounds of grapes. So what question might we ask about this situation? Let's reread the problem. Tony bought 4 3/8 pounds of grapes. He ate 3/4 of a pound, and his sister ate 1 1/8 pounds of grapes. How many pounds of grapes does Tony still have? Well, let's estimate. About how many pounds of grapes did Tony buy? Well, we can take 4 3/8 and say that's close to 4 or maybe 4 1/2, since 4/8 is equivalent to 1/2. And then Tony ate 3/4, which we already decided was close to 1 whole. And his sister ate 1 1/8, which is also close to 1 whole. And so when we think about what's happening in the story, we know that Tony bought a lot of grapes, and then he and his sister ate part of what he bought. In an equation, we could take our estimated values and say 4 1/2, take away the 1 pound more or less that Tony ate would give us 3 1/2 pounds. And then 3.5 minus about 1 pound that his sister ate would leave us with 2.5 pounds. So our estimate could be that Tony has about 2.5 pounds of grapes left. Now it's your turn to be a creative and critical thinker and work on this problem. How can you use pictures, numbers, and/or words to answer this question? How many pounds of grapes does Tony still have? You'll have about 3 minutes to work on this problem. Let's look at a couple different strategies. First, Brian thought of fraction circles. He started with 4 3/8 since that's the total pounds of grapes Tony bought. Then Brian thought about how much Tony ate, 3/4. So he cut up one whole into fourths. Then he took away 3 of those fourths and was left with just 1/4 of that whole. Then he thought about how much Tony's sister ate, 1 1/8 pounds. So he took away 1 whole and 1/8. Then he noticed there were 2/8 left, and he remembered that 2/8 is the same as 1/4. So he put the fraction pieces all together and counted up how many were left. 1, 2, 2 1/4, 2 2/4, which he could see was the same as 2 1/2. So Brian figured out that Tony had 2 1/2 pounds of grapes left. What number sentence could Brian write to show what he did? 4 3/8, that's what he started with, minus the 3/4 that Tony ate, minus the 1 1/8 that Tony's sister ate, equals 2 1/2. Now, Julissa had a different strategy. She wanted to figure out how much Tony and his sister ate together before she even took that amount away from what they started with. So she added what Tony ate, 3/4, with what his sister ate, 1 1/8. And she thought about how to best add these two fractions since they didn't have the same denominator. She remembered she could use the common denominator of 8 to find an equivalent fraction for 3/4. By multiplying 3/4 by 2/2, which is the same as 1 whole, she knows that 6/8 is the same amount. So she rewrote her problem as 6/8 plus 1 1/8 equals 1 7/8. Now she knows the total amount of grapes that Tony and his sister ate. She then decided to subtract that amount from the total, 4 3/8. So, 4 3/8 minus 1 7/8. Julissa knew that 3/8 minus 7/8 was tricky. She also knew that 1 7/8 was the same as 3/8 plus 1 4/8. So she broke up the number sentence into parts and subtracted each part. 4 3/8 minus 3/8 leaves her with 4. Then she took the 1 whole away from the 4 to get 3. Finally, she subtracted 4/8 from 3 and was left with 2 4/8, which Julissa knew was 2 1/2. Let's look at what that might look like on a number line. So, Julissa started at 4 3/8. Then she took away 3/8, which equaled 4. Then she subtracted 1 from that 4, which left her with 3. Finally, she took away 4/8 and was left with 2 4/8, which we know is the same as 2 1/2. Let's compare these two strategies. What do you notice that's the same in both of these strategies? What's different? Use your communicator skills to explain or justify your answer, either by explaining it to someone near you or by writing it down. So what's the same? Both Brian and Julissa started with the total of 4 3/8, and they both subtracted. Also, they both knew equivalents for 1/2. Julissa knew that 4/8 was the same as 1/2, and Brian knew that 2/4 was the same as 1/2. Both of them came up with 2 1/2 as their answer. Now what's different? Well, Julissa used a number line and number sentences to show her thinking, while Brian mainly used fraction circles. Julissa combined the amount of grapes that Tony and his sister ate before subtracting that amount from the total. Brian subtracted twice. First, he subtracted the amount that Tony ate, 3/4, and then the amount that his sister ate, 1 1/8. Julissa also broke apart the 1 7/8 into 3/8 and 1 4/8, whereas Brian broke up the 1 1/8 into the whole number 1 and the fraction 1/8 in order to subtract each part more easily. Now, where are each of their answers? Brian's answer is in his picture. The entire amount of fraction circles that are left is the same as the number of pounds of grapes left. For Julissa, her answer can be found on the number line. The last spot she lands on is the number of pounds of grapes that Tony has left. The amount that Tony and his sister ate is represented with the jumps in Julissa's number line. So let's reflect. Today we spent time looking at and solving a splat and a fraction story problem. Did your strategies match either Brian's strategy or Julissa's strategy? Maybe you had a different way to think about solving the problem. The important thing is for you to understand what's happening in the story problems that you solve and to solve them in the way that makes most sense to you and that you can explain. It doesn't matter if you use pictures, numbers, or actual manipulatives to solve the problems, as long as it's a strategy that you understand and can communicate your thinking. Here's the learning target for today. Some of the skills you may have used today include those for a communicator and for a creative and critical thinker. In your notebook or on some paper, write down something you learned today and something you may still be wondering about. In today's episode of Math Matters, we learned about solving story problems that involved adding and subtracting fractions. I'm Miss Granados. I hope you have a great day and keep on counting.